creative minds out there who make life comfortable for everyone else. Happy Engineers Day to you all. Hello everyone, my name is Mishana Mohammed and I'm your host for the day. Christ College of Engineering, established in 2015, is a new entrant in the field of professional education providers. The institution is managed by the CMI congregation of Devamata Province and is a part of the Christ Educational and Charitable Trust, Irinjalakoda, Kerala. CODE, the community of developers, is the organization of computer science and engineering students and staff of Christ College of Engineering. We are proud and honored to have conducted South India's first ever beach hack in 2019 and its successful sequel in February 2020. We also organize various other hackathons, competitions, webinars, etc. for the development of our community members as well as the college in whole. Spill the Code is an event by Code where our students interact with various personalities. The Masters Club by the Masters for the Masters is an addition to this, where the Masters in the professional field foster the Masters in us. Today on Engineers Day, we have with us Ms.Anwesha Das, Software Engineer at Google, a graduate in Engineering Physics from IIT Bombay and Masters holder from Yale University. With an envious career record, we are really excited to have her with us here today to share her experiences, journey, and pointers to achieve our dream career. So first, let me invite Mrs. Raisa Verghese, our faculty in charge, for the welcome address.
Good morning, all. Engineers Day wishes to each and everyone who have gathered here. I would like to welcome you all to the celebration of Engineers Day by the Association of Department of Computer Science and Engineering, CODE. First, I would like to welcome our chief guest of the day, Ms.Anwesha Das, who is working as software engineer at Google, USA. We feel very much honored and privileged to have such an eminent personality today with us for the celebration of Engineers Day. So a warm welcome to you, ma'am, from Christ College of Engineering. Next, we have our Executive Director, Reverend Father John Palekara, with us. I think he have not joined. He'll be joining soon. We have a great person of wisdom and knowledge with us, our dearest principal, Dr. Sanjeev Johnson. We welcome you, sir, to this celebration. Now we have our HOD, Ramya ma'am, and faculty of Christ College of Engineering with us. Warm welcome to you all. This program is organized by a bunch of students under the wonderful leadership of Ms. Mishana. I welcome Mishana and team to this program. And last but not the least, I would like to welcome all my dearest students to this program. Thank you all. Thank you, Mishana.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And we invite you as well to this program. Next, we'll have the captain of our ship, Principal Dr. Sanjeev Johnson, to speak a few words to us on this Engineers Day.
Good morning, one and all. Today's resource person, Ms.Anwesha Das Madam, HODs, faculty members, and my dear students. Okay, I'm not going for a lengthy talk and all, because we are all waiting for, because all the students, most of you students belong to our own college only. So I'm not going for a lengthy talk and all. Only one thing I want to remind you, okay, this is a special day as we engineers are concerned, Engineers Day. Now, during this time, okay, unlike the previous years, in this COVID pandemic scenario, situations have changed a lot. So, especially computer science, where the changes are taking place in what you can say in exponential rate, I'll say. And moreover, during this time, all the equations, everything has changed right now. So this thing, it's a right time. I'll tell this an apt time to organize such kind of talks. And I especially congratulate CS department and the code for organizing such an wonderful session for all students and as well as for the faculty. Okay, with that, let me conclude, and I wish all the best for this program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. So, Anwesha ma'am, we are really excited to have you here today with us, and we sure do have a lot of questions for you. So let me tell one thing, students with questions can highlight themselves in the chat box, and when your name is called out, can unmute the mic and ask your questions to ma'am. So ma'am, let's begin.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. Like, you guys went above and beyond with that. Thank you. At the end of the day, I'm just an engineer, so not very different from you guys. So I can give a little bit introduction about myself, if that helps. So
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Sure.
Yeah, so I am from India. So I grew up in India. I actually went to undergrad in IIT Bombay, like you mentioned. I studied engineering physics, which is a BTech program for 4 years. And then I decided to actually pursue graduate studies because I liked physics. I actually wanted to be in physics. So I went to Yale and I studied applied physics for 1 year. And I initially wanted to go into PhD and go into academia, but that didn't quite work out. I felt like I wanted to be in industry. So I left after 1 year of my master's. I got my master's degree. And then I decided to join industry. So I ended up joining a company in New York that hired physicists to build software. So that's how I kind of became a software engineer. I was always interested in software engineering. I did a lot of projects and competitions when I was in school, but that's how, but at that first company is where I basically became a software engineer. So I worked there for 2 years, and then I worked in the hedge fund industry. So I don't know if you guys are familiar, but like hedge funds usually like trade a lot of stocks and equities and derivatives, and they so there are lots of different roles for developers. There's quantitative researchers, basically people who come up with algorithms to trade. There are people who build the trading systems. So I used to build the trading system, like the system that would send the trades to stock market and execute everything in low latency. And I also worked on risk systems. So these are systems that would like calculate the risk of your portfolio and things like that. So I used to, so it was a mix of like software development and mathematics. So it was a good fit for me because I had a physics degree. But eventually I realized I wanted to be more in software side. So I left, and I didn't want to be in finance anymore. Like, it's fine, but finance didn't quite work out for me. So then I joined a startup called ZocDoc. So ZocDoc is a platform for booking doctor's appointments. So I think in India, there's a similar thing called Practo. I think if you guys have used Practice, it's basically the same thing. So I used to work at ZocDoc for a couple of years, 2.5 years, and I recently now joined Google. So at Google, I work on Google Cloud. So I build basically databases. One particular database, I work on Bigtable. So if you're familiar with Google Cloud, Bigtable is like our signature NoSQL database. So I basically built Bigtable now. So yeah, so that's the journey. I've been in the US since I came here and joined Yale. So I've been in New York last 11 years, sorry. And yeah, so I can also answer questions in Hindi, don't worry. मेरी हिंदी भी अभी अच्छी है, तो आप हिंदी में भी कोई सवाल पूछ सकते हो, कोई problem नहीं है. But yeah, that's the story.
Okay, ma'am, that's wonderful. So we have a brief of that. So we have a question from Abhishek Menon. We'll go for that. So Abhishek, you can unmute your mic and ask the question, please.
Good morning. My question is, what's the most important leadership lesson you have learned and how had it proven invaluable?
That's a very good question. So typically in software companies, okay, so everything I say is more in the context of US, but I think it will apply to the Indian office as well. And it may also apply to other Indian companies, but my perspective is more from the US side. So just keep that in mind. But anyway, so going back to leadership, typically in software companies here, leadership falls under 2 tracks. So usually you can be like a people manager, which means you manage people, you coordinate projects across different teams, and you're handling the budget and the costs and things like that. Or you can be like IC or individual contributor, which means you are more of a technical leader. You set the technical direction of the projects and you mentor junior members and things like that. So I have traditionally been more of a IC, like a technical leader. So the most important leadership skills for me has been actually mentorship, like teaching, like showing junior members how to like execute project, like setting the direction, like helping reach a decision, right? We can build this software this way, or we can build it this way, helping people weigh the pros and cons and reach a decision, you know, helping people when they get stuck. So I would say mentorship and fostering collaboration, I think, has been the biggest leadership skills for me. So.
Thank you.
That's a great pointer for everyone to know. So ma'am, before we move on to the next question, I have one for myself. So ma'am, you're a student of IIT Bombay as well as Yale University. So what was the experience studying in these 2 prestigious universities? How different and how similar are both?
So they are similar in a lot of ways, in the sense that they're very competitive. Everyone is very smart. Yeah, different. I think IITs are generally, they have good structure. Like, I think since they were established, they have followed a more international model of like semesters and GPAs, and even I graduated 11 years ago. So and I joined like 15 years ago, but even 15 years ago, everything was done online. So, you know, it's a good setup. IITs are well equipped. They get good faculty and the brightest students. And Yale is pretty similar in that sense. Like, they have a lot of resources, a lot of infrastructure. They get the brightest students. I think they're most, so back in the days, again, I graduated a while ago, so things might have changed. But when I was in IIT, it was very rigorous. You had a lot of courses, and there was no like major or minor or anything like that. So the course load was very heavy, and there was practical training and stuff, but it was a little more theoretical focused, whereas Yale actually didn't have as much course load. I would say half of that of IIT. You have much more freedom to like choose course from different departments. Like you know, there's no set courses for you. It's very flexible on what you want to study and how you want to shape your journey at Yale. So also, when I was at Yale, obviously it's not just an engineering college, right? There are people from all disciplines. So the thing that was most helpful for me is that I used to interact with people who are studying all kinds of subjects. So that really broadened my perspective and gave me a much more holistic experience. So yeah, that's how I think Yale was very different from IIT.
That's great to know. Thank you, ma'am. So next we have a question from Srihari NS. You can unmute your mic and ask the question.
Hello, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, what skills do you think will make us a good profile for Google?
That's a good question. So I will try to keep it very, I can't go into great details about Google, obviously, but I will keep it generic enough so it applies to you. So I think the most important thing is problem solving. So you have to be a good problem solver. So I don't know how many of you have already sat for placements or interviews, but generally most of the big tech companies or even startups in the US, they generally have very technical interviews, 4 or 5 rounds. Each round you get like 1 or 2 technical questions. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that stuff, like graph algorithms, dynamic programming, all that kind of stuff. So first requirement obviously is you have to be able to solve these problems, and it's not just if you're able to like give the answer, like here is the graph algorithm. You have to be able to show how you think, and a major part of the evaluation is actually seeing how you think. Like, how do you problem solve? How do you, someone gives you a problem statement, how do you break it down, and arrive at the right solution or the right approach? How do you weigh pros and cons, and what are the benefits of this way versus that way? So obviously problem solving is number one. Second of all, you should be able to handle complex stuff. I would say, like, you should have a firm grasp on the basics, like even things like bit manipulation, right? You should be very clear. Like, so actually when I had my interview at Google, actually one of my questions was around like bit manipulation or something very basic, but you have to be very clear about your fundamentals. At the same time, you should be able to handle complex topics, right? So I don't know, like recursion, backtracking, like you should be able to tackle those kind of problems. So that's another thing. And actually the most important thing is something we call googliness. So usually there is one round of behavioral interview, and Google likes to see whether you will fit in the Google culture, right? So in Google, it's a very collaborative environment. So it's very, very important that you show good teamwork, that you can work with a team, you can articulate your ideas, and you can also, work with other people, collaborate with other people on ideas. It's called googliness, but it's basically like you're someone we can work with, like we would want to work with. So that's also very, very important. So yeah, technical skills, good grasp on fundamentals, googliness, and most importantly, problem solving. Like, you should be a good problem solver. So.
Thank you, ma'am. So, ma'am, you mentioned how we should have a good grasp on our basics, and you mentioned about bit manipulation. So, what other technical terms should we be very up to date with?
So again, can talk in terms of US, but do you guys use LeetCode? I'm sure. Are you guys familiar with LeetCode? No. So yeah, generally you know what? I will type it here in the chat so it's there for you guys. And
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, yes. Okay, somebody said yes. Okay, great. So yeah, so generally in the US, when you have technical interviews, you use some sort of website for like preparing. So there are a bunch of websites. It's like a whole industry, but there's like HackerRank and there's Codility. I would say LeetCode is the most popular. So if you go to this website, you're going to see lots and lots of problems. I think there are like 1,500 problems or something, and they're broken down by different categories. And these are generally the kind of problems that are asked in interviews. And depending on if you're a fresh graduate or you're like a senior person, either they will ask you a hard problem or like a medium problem. They generally don't ask easy problems, so it's either hard or medium. So yeah, the most popular topics I would say are like I said, graph problems, breadth first search, depth first search, dynamic programming, backtracking, recursion, stacks, queues, and then, sliding window problems, bit manipulation, like I said. Yeah, all these kind of problems. But I would say with Google, they generally don't lift question from LeetCode directly. So a lot of companies will just directly ask LeetCode questions. Google does not do that. Google generally has like its own set of questions, but usually the way to solve it is using one of these algorithms. So it's really about you to think about the problem and think like, maybe this is, this can be solved using breadth first search, and you have to apply yourself. So.
Thank you, ma'am, for the great insight. So everyone, do make sure you do browse through leetcode.com. So next we have a question from Cecil Maria Joy. Cecil, you can unmute your mic and ask the question.
Hi, ma'am. So what do you think are the role of internships, and do you have a preference when it comes to the type of internship?
So I actually don't have as much experience with internship, but I will say, yes, if you do get an internship at bigger tech companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon, you have very high chance of getting a return offer and joining as a full-time later on. I would say it's rare not to get a full-time offer. So it's obviously a gateway to actually get a full-time job. I don't know what different types of internships are there. Most of the companies have very standard internship programs. So like a software engineering internship program, or like a, I don't know, program management internship program, or like a business analyst internship program. So they're usually pretty standardized. So yeah, I don't know what the different types are. But if you don't, let's say you don't get internship in one of these companies, even if you go to any other company, it's a very valuable experience. It's something to talk about during interview, right? Like it sets you apart. Like, they're interviewing 100 computer science students. How do you differentiate between this person and the other person? So internship is the way to show it. Like, I worked on this project, and these are the things I accomplished. And a lot of interviews also ask you like specific examples, like give us a time you show teamwork, or tell us about a time you solved a problem, right? So you can use your internship to give an example, like, oh, for example, in my internship, I accomplished XYZ, and I took my project from start to finish and, made 10% more revenue for my company, or some such thing. So in the end, I would say internship is all about what you learned and how much impact you had. So if you learned a lot and you're able to show like, listen, I made such a difference to the company, that's what I think matters the most. So, and of course, if it's a big brand name, then that helps.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am. We have a question from George. George, you can ask your question now.
Hi, ma'am.
Yeah.
What do you think? How important are our LinkedIn and our GitHub profiles for our placements?
That's a very good question. So they are pretty important. So it's less important at my level, because for senior people, there's a lot of other stuff that goes into evaluating you. But for fresh graduates, I would say it's actually very important, because it's, again, another way to differentiate yourself, right? Or give examples. Like someone asks, okay, give an example of an app you made, or like a project you've done. You can immediately say, oh yeah, on my GitHub profile, here's a project I've done. Also, so LinkedIn, GitHub are a great way to get that first step in the door. Like if you have a good LinkedIn profile, you have a good GitHub profile, or you blog, like you are active on Medium or something. So Medium, again, if people are not familiar, it's a popular like microblogging platform with like a lot of software articles and stuff. So if you blog, or if you have GitHub, it immediately catches attention of the recruiter, right? So if there's a pile of resumes, yours is going to go a little higher up, because you have all these extra stuff. So that will get you in the door faster. But I will say, once you get in the door, then you have to crack those interviews, which means you have to be good with those other topics that I mentioned. You should be able to solve the problems. But GitHub and LinkedIn should help you a lot in like, standing out amongst resumes. So.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, we have a question from Bijoy. So Bijoy has asked, did you see yourself where you are right now, 10 or even 5 years ago?
That's a good question. No. So, world has changed a lot when I graduated. So I actually graduated during the last financial crisis in 2009. So our placement was shit. And most of the companies didn't show up for placements. So which is actually one of the reasons I decided to go to graduate school, because I was like, there are no jobs. What am I going to do? So so when I graduated at the time, tech was big, but tech was not that big. I think the top companies at the time were like McKinsey, BCG, finance, like Morgan Stanley or Deutsche Bank or whatever. Those were the preferred career paths, like consulting, finance, oil and gas, like Schlumberger was preferred. But it was only in the last 5 to 10 years that tech kind of overtook these companies. It pays more, and you have more work-life balance. So now all my friends who at the time went to consulting and finance are now slowly moving into tech. They're becoming like product managers or like program managers or whatever. So when I joined, I was very interested in software, but like I said, I was in the physics mindset. So I actually thought I will end up in like semiconductor industry or something. Then when I was at Yale, I thought I'll go into finance and do like quantitative research, like use algorithms to trade, because that was very big when I graduated. I used to get a lot of interview calls from Wall Street. So I thought that I would do that. But then eventually, as the world kept changing, tech became more and more, better, more and more of a attractive place to be. And I grew tired of finance. I eventually kind of ended up in software engineering. So no, I didn't think I would work in software 10 years back. Yeah.
So thank you, ma'am. We have a question from Anand Anthony. He has asked, is work from home too much of a load for the tech sector?
Yes and no. So what I have noticed, so when work from home started, I was still at my startup company, ZocDoc. And because it's a startup, it's very like, fast paced, people are hustling and working all the time. So with work from home, we were still working just as hard. So it didn't, in fact, I would say we started working more hard. We had to release some new features. Like we actually started doing telemed and stuff. So we released all that very quickly because we were working even harder. Since I've joined at Google, things work differently at Google. So I'm a little more chill. I have more time. I don't think work from home has impacted productivity at Google either. Mostly people are productive. They get their stuff done. All our releases are on time. All our product goals are on time. I think the main thing is people's, mental health and like, there's less boundaries. Like you're working and living in the same space. So people forget to like switch off and like take a break or like, or set boundaries. People, don't take vacation as much. So it's more the health of the employees or well-being of the employees that's been affected. But I don't necessarily think the actual work has impacted as much. So we will see. So Google is going to be work from home until summer of next year, so another year. And I think Google is trying to see like how it works out. I don't know how it is with other companies. Some are like permanently work from home. I think it's all a big experiment. People are trying to figure out if it's going to work long term or not. So.
Okay, ma'am. So we'll go for the next one. We have one from Noel. He has asked, how is the work environment and culture like at Google? This is something that everyone needs to know.
Yeah, it's a very, very wonderful culture. So I would say the best, culture-wise, absolutely the best company I've worked at so far. I did work at finance, which was very cutthroat, and I worked at startup, which was very busy. So, I haven't worked at other big tech companies like Facebook, Apple, Amazon, besides Google. So I can't compare to other big tech companies, but compared to the other medium and small sized companies and other industries I worked in, Google is absolutely the best culture. Like I said, Google really makes sure it hires the right kind of people. Like I said, you have the behavioral interview. They really try to make sure that they're hiring people who can work with everybody. They don't like to hire like, narcissistic people or people who are too much into themselves. Google doesn't do that. Google hires very collaborative and, people who believe in teamwork. So you're very respected at Google. Your opinions are always heard. There's no hierarchy. It's a very flat organization in general. So everything is very bottoms up as opposed to top down. But I would say, that's also true for my previous company. I will say that, but I think the biggest difference is also Google is very engineering driven. So like I said, I haven't worked at other companies. But from what I hear, again, this is not scientific, this is just what I've heard, but Amazon is very customer focused, Microsoft is very sales driven, Facebook is much more product driven, Google is very engineering driven. So if you're an engineer at Google, you are, your opinion matters a lot, and you drive a lot of things at Google. So, which is actually one of the reasons I joined. I really enjoy that at Google. So.
That's great to know. Next, we have a question from Karthik. Karthik, you can unmute your mic and ask the question.
So hi, I wanted to ask, as a person working in the US, they're having a lot of issues with racism here. So has racism had an impact with your career, or your career basically?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, there's been a lot of awareness and movement around racial injustice, and it's impacted pretty much all the companies here. Everybody has been trying to sort of address it, and especially provide support to people in their companies, especially people of color and minorities. So there's been a lot of initiative to sort of do what you can within the company to address racial injustice and stuff. So a lot of diversity and inclusion groups have come up. A lot of diversity and inclusion chiefs and stuff have come up who help with initiatives to increase the proportion of Black people or minorities in positions of power. So there's a lot going on to sort of address it in terms of so I see that's one way I notice our workplace being affected. Personally, for me, it hasn't. It's a very good question. It's a tough question to answer. And I think it depends a lot from person to person. So I can only speak to my personal experiences. I have faced racism maybe once or twice, very early on when I moved to New York. Nothing in workplace, but just walking down the street, someone's saying something about Indians or something. So that has happened to me once or twice. I personally have not experienced it in workplace. I'm trying to think. Yeah, no, not really. But again, it's depends a lot from person to person. I will say generally in tech, there are less Black people represented. So there's probably higher likelihood for them to face racism just by virtue of the fact that there aren't as many Black people. There do tend to be a lot of Indian and Chinese folks, because generally we are a good, well-represented population in tech. So because there are a lot of Indian and Chinese, you don't experience racism because we are kind of everywhere. So I personally haven't experienced it as much. What I have experienced is oftentimes some gender bias or some unconscious bias and things like that. So yeah, it's a very good question. I wish I had a more nuanced answer, but the simple thing is I personally haven't experienced it.
And that was informative as well. So next we have a question from Aparna Ann. Aparna, you can unmute your mic and ask the question.
Hi, ma'am. Could you please describe about the selection procedure at Google?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, it's a very standard procedure. So you apply for a position, through a recruiter, or maybe you applied it on google.com, the website or something. Your resume is vetted, and then someone reaches out to you, and then you schedule a set of interviews usually. So I think it depends from level to level or some other factors. So usually you start with a phone interview. I don't think I did a phone interview, but usually you start from a phone interview. And if that's a screening process, so you will be asked to solve a problem in a shared document. So they will spell out a programming question. You have to solve that. Like I said, the most important thing is explaining your thought process and how you arrive at the solution. If that goes well, usually you're invited on site, or during work from home, probably virtually, you'll be asked to do a set of interviews. So usually it's 4 to 5 depending on your level. So fresh graduates usually have to do 4 interviews, I believe. So 3 are purely technical, 1 is behavioral. If you're senior, usually you also have to do a system design round. So you have to they will give you a problem and you have to design the system and go through different parts of the architecture. So that will be an extra interview for that. If you're, so that's the 4 interviews. And then, so after the 4, actually Google has a very long process. So I'm not sure about fresh graduates, but I think it's the same. So usually with Google, after the interviews, there is a package prepared for you where the recruiter will put together all your details. It's sent to a hiring committee. The hiring committee then makes a decision. After that, if the hiring committee says yes, then you will go and find a team where you can fit. And if the team manager says yes, then you get an offer, then there is some negotiation period, and then you're finally in. So it's actually, Google, I think, has the longest process. So but in terms of the technical interviews, it's very standard. Like I said, Google doesn't ask questions directly off of LeetCode. It has its own set of questions and own way of evaluating, but it's not that different from other companies.
That's very insightful, ma'am. So next we'll have a question from Thomas CB. Thomas?
Hello, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I have this one question that we humans have this basic instinct, to strive for more, and in a good way, actually. So you said you have been working at Google for 10, 11 years. So have you ever felt like you should be moving on to the Amazons or the Facebooks? You have ever thought like that?
No, I've actually only worked at Google 4 months, 3-4 months now. So I worked at other places for 10 years. So, but that's a good question. So yes, I am one of those people. I tend to change jobs every 2 years. I get bored and I want to do something else. I don't feel like that with Google yet, but we will see. But mainly because it's a very big organization. It has so many departments and so many product areas. So if you get bored with your product, I work in cloud, I can just be I don't want to work on cloud. I will work on Google Meet or something. I can try and do that. So it just has so many products that you can kind of shift around. And it has a great culture, which is difficult to find. So I think the one thing that differentiates Google from other big tech companies is the culture. It is possible that if I went to Facebook, they might offer me more money, but I just like Google culture more. So for that reason, I think I'll probably stay and, try to move between teams, but never say never. If I get a good opportunity, sure, I might leave.
So are you more interested in a product-based section or a completely IT-based itself?
Do you mean my role in terms of what I do?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a software engineer. So I build Bigtable. I built a product called Bigtable. But what I was saying is in terms of if you get bored with the product that you build, right? I built Bigtable. I don't want to build Bigtable anymore. Too much Bigtable. I can always switch to some other product. So so it will be so. It's code, but it's very different domain, right? So right now I'm dealing with a lot of file system internals and HDD and SSD storage because Bigtable is a database. But maybe if I moved to Google Meet or something, right, then I can work on WebRTC or something. So it's I can start working on very different pieces of technology, right? So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Thomas. Next, we'll have a question from Arun Joseph. Arun?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Dee, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Okay, so I got one question and a follow-up question, okay? So the first question is, how accepting is US right now to international students?
That's a very good question. Unfortunately, I'm not a lawyer, so I can only tell you sort of anecdotally. Actually, I don't know much about students either. Yeah, I think the visas. There was something with the F1 visa. They said if all your classes are virtual, you can't come, but it has been reversed. I'm very sure of that. Yeah, so I think F1 visas are fine now. So I think it is accepting with international students. I'm trying to think if there was any other changes. No, I think there was the one change, but it has been reversed. So, but I don't know how many applications are coming into universities and how much scholarships they're giving, or like, you know, what kind of classes they're offering. I don't know what's going on there, but I think visa-wise, it's clear now. I don't think there is any problem at the moment. So.
Okay, this follow-up question is like, which country would you suggest to any fresher? Like, because of the current visa issue, like, would you rather suggest a person to go to Canada or come to the United States, like for a software career?
Yeah, for a software career, there are a lot of visa issues in the US. Touch wood, I haven't had too many problems, but I do know a lot of people who at least have considered moving to Canada because it's easier to get residency there, like green card there, and then you can settle down. You have less problems with visa. So yeah, so Canada is definitely a good option, but I don't know how many universities are there. There are a few. I mean, there are a few good universities, but in terms of recruiting, like so a lot of the companies like Microsoft does have offices in Canada. So Microsoft is based in Redmond, and it's very close to Canadian border. So they have an office in Vancouver as well. So a lot of companies do recruit for Canadian offices as well. But it's just not as many jobs as in the US. So there are a lot of opportunities in Canada, including like bigger companies, but just not as many as here. So
like,
US
I got one more question.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
is it true that we have to get a job in our STEM majors, like for staying in the United States?
Yes, partially. So for example, I actually don't have a degree in the required STEM major because I'm a physicist and I work as a computer science. So yes. So what can happen is if you have a degree in something else, they will sometimes they'll give you an RFE, which means like request for evidence. So you have to like submit extra paperwork. So you have to show that, no, this course that I took relates to this job duty. Sometimes you can also argue that because I have this job plus this much job experience, it's actually like a computer science degree. So there are many, many ways that lawyers can fight the RFE. So it really depends on how good your lawyer is and if the company is doing a good job. So yeah, so it's a requirement, but there are ways around it.
Okay, thank you, Dee. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Arun. So next question from Priyanka Harikumar.
Hi, ma'am. My question is, would you give us one advice from your experience?
Advice. My advice would be, career is very long. So I would say, don't worry too much about like your first job or like, are you getting the perfect grades? Obviously, it's great if you get good grades. It'll make your life very, very easy. I didn't have perfect grades in college, and I did a very different job when I graduated. But career is a long process. So I think what matters most is finding out what you really enjoy. What is your passion? Like, do you like software engineering? Do you like data science? Do you like product management? Do you like, data engineering or SRE, system reliability engineering? Like, you should figure out what your passion is and work towards that. And even if you don't get the perfect job right out of college, career is very long. So, it's entirely possible that you start at some company somewhere, but you end up at Google. It's entirely possible. So, nobody stays at their job that they got right out of college, right? I know maybe one person from my batch in IIT who is still at the job that they got out of college, right? Everyone veers off in different directions. So don't worry too much about place. I mean, you should try to get a good job, but worry more about your long-term career and what is your passion and what will make you happy for longer term, you know.
Thank you, ma'am. We have our Executive Director, Father John Palyakara, in now. Welcome, Father, to the show. So next we'll have a question from Krishna Santosh.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi.
Ma'am, how was your first day working at Google like?
So I actually joined during work from home. So I did absolutely nothing all day and just waited for my laptop to ship to my house. So it was a very boring day. But my first day after I got my laptop was pretty good. I met my team, you know, I said hello to my team, like we had a team-wide meeting. And then immediately I was shipped off to training. So Google, once you join Google, there's like, if you're a software engineer, you have to undergo like a training program for 3 weeks where they introduce all the different Google concepts and tools and processes. So, so yeah, I was immediately shipped off, like I started training right away. So there wasn't as much time to process things, but yeah, that's the first day.
Ma'am, so you know, we have heard a lot of wonderful stories about how awesome the Google headquarters is, how awesome the food there is. So were you disappointed in having to stay home and work and not at the
I was very disappointed. I've actually haven't been to Google office as an employee. I've been before, but I haven't been since I actually joined Google. So it's a little bit sad. I didn't even get much, you know, like swag. Like I didn't get any Google merchandise yet. So, but you know, it's the people. My team is wonderful. So even though we work virtually, you know, it's a great environment, and I've already learned a lot from everybody. So you know, so it's been good. You know, I guess when I go to the office, I will know what I've been missing out on. But you know, it hasn't been too bad. So.
Okay, ma'am. Sona, we have a question from Sona.
Good morning, ma'am.
Yes.
My question is, how should a perfect resume look like? How to have a good resume?
Yeah, there is no, I don't know if there's a perfect resume, but so the one important thing is like making it like a very impactful. So like it should be very clear, like what are the specific. So usually, okay, let me backtrack. So when I was in IIT, we would usually have workshops on like resume writing and stuff. So that's where I kind of learned how to write resumes. And the format that I've always followed is like define the problem statement, right? Define the actions that you took. Okay, these are the things that I did, and then define the results. So like I helped solve this problem. I released this application. It helped like X% of users be 10% faster or something like that. So, so you should definitely follow a good structure and clearly show what are the actions that you have taken and what were the impacts of the different projects that you have done. But other than that, it should also be brief. Like a lot of fresh graduates write like 3-page resumes. Nobody wants to read 3-page resumes. It should ideally be 1 page. Sometimes 2 pages is okay, but ideally 1 page. Keep it short. Things should jump out. So like which school you go to, what is your GPA? It should be very clear. And also like broke it down into sections like internships, you know, work experience, you know. And also like if you have done any extracurriculars, if you're part of any like groups or clubs, you should highlight that. So yeah, brief and to the point, I would say, is the best kind of resume.
Thank you, ma'am. Everyone should note all of that. And next we'll have a question from Atul Krishna.
So ma'am, my question is that what kind of language do you use at Google? Like, does Google ask you to specialize in any kind of programming language?
Yeah, so Google doesn't really care what kind of languages you know. Like they generally think, if you're a good engineer, you're a good problem solver, like you have the good fundamentals in data structures and algorithms, they can teach you any programming language. So they don't particularly care about that. But at Google itself, they use, so my team uses C++ mainly. They also have, Google also has Java and Go, some Python. What else? I think those are the main languages. Yeah, and of course JavaScript. Google uses Angular. It came up with Angular, so it uses Angular. Those are the main, and TypeScript also. So those are the main things. It depends a lot from team to team, like what your team uses. My team is like I said, it works on low-level file system stuff, so we use more C++. I actually haven't used C++ in the last 10 years, but like I said, it doesn't matter. They assume you can pick up any programming language as long as fundamentals are good. So.
Okay.
Thank
you, Atul. Next, we have a question from Sharath.
Hello, ma'am. So my question is like that, like it's like a human nature that you will be like making some mistakes. So how was your experiences with the mistakes you done, and how did you felt after making the mistake, and what was like the work environment and everything?
Yeah, so Google, much like, and my previous company as well, like most tech companies tend to follow a blameless culture. So we call it blameless postmortem. So typically, like, it is not a liability on you at all that you have made a mistake. Like generally, if a mistake is made, it is assumed that there must be something wrong with our processes or our systems or our tools that we need to fix so that a developer doesn't make this mistake again. It is not about finger pointing. That is like, explicit no, like you should never point fingers at anybody in any meeting or in any document. So it's completely blameless culture. So Google has like an entire procedure around it. Like, I don't want to go too much into details, but if like an outage happens or incident, basically like incident management. So if an incident happens, something goes down or there's a high error rates or something, usually you mitigate it. First of all, you announce to everybody. You should never hide your mistakes. So the number one thing is you tell everybody like, hey, there is a problem, X number of users might be impacted. So you announce it, you mitigate it. So usually it means there was a bad release or something. So you roll back the release and set it to the previous version or do whatever else you need to do to fix it. And then once things have calmed down, usually you will have a postmortem. And postmortems, like I said, it's all about figuring out what was the loophole in our system that allowed this problem to happen. And you never point fingers at anybody. And I have been told many times that there are people at Google who caused a big outage or caused a big problem, but they were very responsive and they handled the incidents very well and were promoted. So you could get promoted because you handled a problem very, very well. Nobody's going to care that you caused an outage. It's more about what did you do after the outage. So if that makes sense.
Thank you,
I think that's a very good concept, the blameless postmortem. That's yes. A very good concept.
Yeah, and it's actually engineering, like there's an entire discipline around it. So you can search for it. You might find some talks from some experts on blameless postmortems and stuff. So.
Yes, ma'am. We have a question from Austin. Austin?
Good morning, ma'am. So I need to know about the transition from the startup sort of to working in Google, which is a dream company role.
Sorry, I was not able to hear that question properly. Do you mind typing it or something?
Yes, I think you have some network issues. So can you type in your question? I'll read it out. Meanwhile, we have a question from Sonu. His question is, to what extent have your technical experience working with previous companies helped you solve your problems at Google?
Yeah, so it has, experience matters a lot in engineering, especially I would say when it comes to architecture and system design. So, when you're a junior developer, you are very focused on like your little class and like, your little feature little button you added somewhere, you know, right? But as you grow senior, more and more senior, you are much more looking at the big picture, like how does my app interact with this other API, with this other like database, and like this other event-driven system, like how does it all play together? So luckily for me, I have worked a lot on greenfield projects, like you're building system from scratch. So I have a lot of experience like designing systems and, you know, building systems that are totally new. So that experience has helped me a lot in like understanding the flow of systems, which is very important when you work at a company the scale of Google, right? If you just know your part, maybe you can build small features, but when you have to work on big projects, you know, it's important to understand the whole big picture. So yeah, that has helped me a lot.
Okay, ma'am. So we'll go for the last question. There are lots of things we need to ask. All of us are very curious, but then due to time constraint, we'll go for the last one. So Austin has typed in his question. I need to know the transition from ZocDoc startup company to Google, a dream company for all.
Yeah, so I will say I'm very lucky in the sense that I don't actually apply to any of these companies. Usually I get a lot of recruiter emails. That's why I was saying somebody asked about US versus Canada. There are just many software engineering jobs in the US. So generally, you don't have to even apply. People will reach out to you and be like, hey, you want to join? So I had a Google recruiter reach out to me like 2 years ago. I actually attended a conference. I attended Grace Hopper conference, and I had left my email address somewhere. They reached out to me, and then 2 years later, I was like, oh, hey, by the way, yeah, I would like to do the interview. So then I just went and did the interview. So yeah, so usually you would get, usually if you work in the US, you get a lot of LinkedIn emails, you get a lot of personal emails. If you want to apply, you can always apply on LinkedIn. But chances of getting interview are very high because you know, most tech companies think, okay, let's just at least give a phone interview, right? What's the harm? So it's not difficult to get an interview, I assure you. What's difficult is usually, you know, like I said, solve the problems. You know, you have to study usually. So I studied for at least a month, 2 months, just solving problems. If you want context, I did like maybe 300 lead code problems. So yes, it's mostly like studying and actually cracking the interview as opposed to getting the interview. Getting the interview is not that difficult usually. If you are a good engineer, you have a good resume. So.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, one more thing I wanted to ask was how important are our communication, our writing skills, and all that, apart from our technical skills?
Yeah, so that's actually very important. So especially at companies the size of Google, or like even for like startups, like especially if you want to grow into a leadership position, right? So if you're good at coding, you can, you know, probably get a job, but how you progress in that job depends entirely on like how you articulate your ideas. Are you good with documenting? Are you good with diagrams? You know, do you collaborate well? Do you help solve people's problems? You know, so those are the essential skills to grow into a leadership role. Like without those, it's very difficult to be a leader. You know, like you can be maybe a junior engineer, but if you want to be senior, that's very important.
So ma'am, any tips from your side on how we can build up this skill, the communication skill?
Yeah, so generally a lot of companies have a standard process for writing. So in Google, we call it design docs. In my previous company, we used to call it tech specs. So basically, usually there are templates, like follow this template and write this document about how you're going to build this feature, right? So, so as you write more and more tech specs, more and more design docs, you should get better at it. Like I said, you should keep yourself, it's always good to keep yourself updated. Like I write on Medium. I have written once or twice on Medium. I read a lot of Medium. I watch a lot of like YouTube videos. Like I attend conferences. I also watch conference videos on YouTube. I listen to a lot of podcasts, you know, reading books. I would say Yeah, podcasts especially. So keep yourself updated on like latest like open source and things like that. Read a lot, listen to things a lot, and that will automatically, instill a lot of, technical skills in you. So.
Okay, so thank you so much, ma'am. That was a very interactive, illuminating, and very insightful session. So, as I mentioned earlier, we have our Executive Director, Father John Palekara in. So, Father, if you're still there, can you speak a few words to us on this Engineers Day?
Thank you, Mishana, and I do congratulate our young engineers on this Engineers Day. And we are celebrating this Engineers Day on behalf of a very reputable engineer of our country. He was a visionary, and definitely we should get inspiration from such kind of engineers. And we should definitely think how we can develop our country better. Because engineers are nation builders, and we can definitely build our country by way of our contribution. Instead of thinking negatively, let us see positively. And this COVID pandemic is actually a gold mine, I say. Means we engineers get a good chance to develop and to make our country better. Of course, limitations and negativities are not needed in life. That only stimulate us, motivate us to do better. So in this Engineers Day, let us join together. Let us think together how we can make our country better. And I also gratefully acknowledge and thank Anwesha. She found her a valuable time to come over and motivate our young engineers. It's a big, generous step from her side, and we really thank her. And I believe we can again contact and keep in touch with her, because she is working with a big corporate company, and her ideas and her collaboration will definitely help us to reach our target and to be more and more focused on our engineering profession. So thank you so much, the engineering, our computer science department of Christ College of Engineering, for making such an initiative. I congratulate HOD and Rizamis, all the faculty members, and especially the student community. Miss always tell me, our student community only can take all the initiative. That's what we have to do. And I really appreciate all our young engineers who initiated such an interaction with a great engineer. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Take care and happy Engineers Day. Bye.
Thank you so much, Father. And thank you for all your support, all your constant support and strength. And now I will invite Christo, Secretary of Code, to present the vote of thanks.
Good day to all. Is it audible?
Yep.
Yes, Christo, yes.
Okay. So I, on behalf of Computer Science and Engineering Department of Christ College of Engineering, I would like to express my sincere gratitude towards the speaker for today, Ms.Anwesha Das, for enlightening us with your knowledge and experience. It was great to get an insight on how we should gain skills and use it to our best in order to achieve our dream job. I'm sure that the participants are thoroughly benefited from this session. I would also like to thank our Executive Director, Father John Palekara, and our Principal, Dr. Sanjeev Johnson, for gracing this meet with your esteemed presence. I also thank Dr. Ramya Keshashi, the Head of Computer Science and Engineering Department, and Mrs. Reza Varghese, Associate Professor and Faculty in charge of Code. Last but not the least, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for your enthusiastic participation. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. That was.
Thank you, Christo. So once again, on behalf of Code, I would like to thank you so much.
Yeah,
I would like to thank you for coming in here today.
I'm sorry we didn't get to all the questions. If you want, maybe you can compile any of the questions that are left over, and you can send it to my email if that's
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, ma'am. So anyone have any questions, please do contact our members. We will have them compile and we'll send it to ma'am and have it answered. So again, thank you so much for ma'am for spending your valuable time with us, and about how approachable you were when I first connected with you and how ready you were to do this. So thank you so much for all that, and I'm pretty sure this was very insightful, very illuminating for everyone here, especially for our final year students. It will help a lot in their placements. And again, I hope that we get to do more sessions with you. And I would also like to thank the college management, our HOD, our faculty in charge, and the entire core team. There are a lot of people working behind to have this show smooth. So thank you to all of them, and thank you to each one of you for being present here today and making this a success. So thank you, everyone, and thank you so much, ma'am, once again.
Yeah.
And I wish you all the very best for all your future endeavors.
Thank you so much. It was a great meeting you all. Good luck with your careers. Remember, career is a long thing. So, you guys have a long career ahead of yourselves. So, thanks again for having me. I'm going to sign off. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.